Hi, guys. This is the second podcast for week 10 and week 9 and 10. We're going to compress them into two podcasts. And week 9 is going to be the lesson plan for a Muslim leader in Brooklyn. And week 10 would be Jacques Berzon and the Coming Age. That's the second podcast, which I'll post after this is by tomorrow morning. So just just as a reminder, you need to turn in all your. I'm missing a lot of midterms, essay number twos, and research papers from a lot of different people. If you see already on the uploaded page, go under check status of the re-upload status. You'll see the ones that I've already graded and marked. You can see the people that you would then be able to see my comments and my grade that I've given you on the paper. But just remember to submit everything. Midterm grades have to be in by the 16th of April, all right? So today we're going to talk about two things. The Muslim Leader in Brooklyn, Reconciling Two Words by Andrea Elliott, and Jacques Berzon, The Coming Age. I hope to do this video a little bit more interactively. I have some mixed media that I'm going to present to you for this particular video, but in a moment, we're going to talk about the Muslim Leader in Brooklyn and kind of fold the media on YouTube into the video podcast. So, a Muslim leader in Brooklyn, Reconciling Two Worlds. It's essentially a culture clash between two different types of cultures. And as you're aware, that this is the season for religious observances. Easter is coming up on Sunday, and soon people will start observing for Ramadan. Now, one of the issues that are currently being talked about is how will these observances take place if there are social distancing restrictions in place. And that's a complicated factor for a lot of people who are of faith, whether it be through Christian faith or Islamic faith. In the Muslim Leader in Brooklyn, you have two things going on. You have an imam who's coming over from Egypt to Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, to take over a mosque. And he is oftentimes confronted by new things that are what he wouldn't have ordinarily thought to question back in Egypt. For example, is it halal or lawful to eat a Big Mac? So what does halal mean? Halal means lawful according to Islamic law. Before we get started in this essay, let's talk about some things relating to Islamic culture. When I think of Islamic culture, I think of a few different things, including the cuisine, which I'm a big fan of, like Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine, including falafels. The smell of falafels is really delicious, and the crispness of the falafel itself, tahini, the sauce, couscous or lamb, or lamb kebab, or other types of salad like baba ganoush, I think, and things like there's a sound. The sounds of Islam in many cultures, the sound of the prayer call is very very common in many Middle Eastern countries, and in the United States, where mosques were situated. The other type of attribute or aspect of Islam would be the artwork, which I'm interested in from a more aesthetic point of view. It's common in Christian art, for Christian icons and the Savior of Jesus Christ to be portrayed in artwork. But you may not know that In Islam, it's not lawful or halal to depict the Prophet Muhammad in any kind of visual way. But instead, there is a different type of uh, artwork called the complex geometry of Islamic design, which I'm going to
The grid helps
to
determine
show here with the help of this YouTube
In
video.
Islamic
Okay.
culture, geometry is everywhere. You can find it in mosques, madrasas, palaces, and private homes. This tradition in the 8th century CE, during the early history of Islam, when craftsmen took pre-existing motifs from Roman and Persian cultures and developed them into new forms of visual expression. This period of history was a golden age of Islamic culture, during which many achievements of previous civilizations were preserved and further developed, resulting in fundamental advancements in scientific study and mathematics. Accompanying this was an increasingly sophisticated use of abstraction and complex geometry in Islamic art, from intricate floral motifs adorning carpets and textiles to patterns of tilework that seemed to repeat infinitely, inspiring wonder and contemplation of eternal order. Despite the remarkable complexity of these designs, they can be created with just a compass to draw circles and a ruler to make lines within them. And from these simple tools emerges a kaleidoscopic multiplicity of patterns. So how does that work? Well, everything starts with a circle. The first major decision is, how will you divide it up? Most patterns split the circle into 4, 5, or 6 equal sections, and each division gives rise to distinctive patterns. There's an easy way to determine whether any pattern is based on 4-fold, 5-fold, or 6-fold symmetry. Most contain stars surrounded by petal shapes. Counting the number of rays on a starburst, or the number of petals around it, tells us what category the pattern falls into. A star with 6 rays, or surrounded by 6 petals, belongs in the 6-fold category. One with 8 petals is part of the 4-fold category, and so on. There's another secret ingredient in these designs, an underlying grid. Invisible but essential to every pattern, the grid helps determine the scale of the composition before work begins, keeps the pattern accurate, and facilitates the invention of incredible new patterns. Let's look at an example of how these elements come together. We'll start with a circle within a square and divide it into 8 equal parts. We can then draw a pair of crisscrossing lines and overlay them with another 2. These lines are called construction lines, and by choosing a set of their segments, we'll form the basis of our repeating pattern. Many different designs are possible from the same construction lines, just by picking different segments. And the full pattern finally emerges when we create a grid with many repetitions of this one tile, in a process called tessellation. By choosing a different set of construction lines, we might have created this pattern, or this one. The possibilities are virtually endless. We can follow the same steps to create 6-fold patterns. By drawing construction lines over a circle divided into 6 parts, and then tessellating it, we can make something like this. Here's another 6-fold pattern that has appeared across the centuries and all over the Islamic world, including Marrakesh, Agra, Konya, and the Alhambra. 4-fold patterns fit in a square grid, and 6-fold patterns in a hexagonal grid. 5-fold patterns, however, are more challenging to tessellate because pentagons don't neatly fill a surface. So instead of just creating a pattern in a pentagon, other shapes have to be added to make something that is repeatable, resulting in patterns that may seem confoundingly complex, but are still relatively simple to create. Also, tessellation is not constrained to simple geometric shapes, as M.C. Escher's work demonstrates. And while the Islamic geometric design tradition doesn't tend to employ elements like fish and faces, it does sometimes make use of multiple shapes to craft complex patterns. This more than 1,000-year-old tradition has wielded basic geometry to produce works that are intricate, decorative, and pleasing to the eye. And these craftsmen prove just how much is possible with some artistic intuition, creativity, dedication, and a great compass and ruler.
All right, I thought that was pretty cool. I hope you enjoyed that video clip from Eric Brugge, The Complex Geometry of Islamic Design. I just want to briefly touch on a few different things in this essay. One of the things that really seems pretty evident in this essay is that though his duties are clear in terms of what he should do, in terms of his conducting his prayer in the mosque, that it's not so clear all the time how things are interpreted, especially in the United States, when there's what I would consider to be a more secular culture than in Islam or in Islamic countries. So, for example, many people would ask him whether or not it is halal for people getting married or divorcing or things of that nature, and and then there's also the issue of like how one dresses. In Islamic tradition, women wear what they call hijabs, they're covering their hair, and one thing you can think about is why that is oftentimes for Islamic women a matter of pride, but also to wear that hijab, it means to a certain kind of modesty, and in some ways it's in the United States many times it's a matter of maybe it's a matter of choice, maybe it's a matter of observance and taking pride in one's culture. But another issue is how the Imam in this essay takes all these issues and all these different questions in consideration, like what is eating a Big Mac halal? Can a Muslim waiter serve alcohol? Should a Muslim accept such a job as a waiter, for example? What other cultural challenges do you think Muslims face in the United States today? The availability of online pornography, for example, online dating sites, and the culture at large where dating is considered to be an everyday part of life is not viewed the same way in Islamic culture. So I guess the main point of the essay is that he has to be flexible enough to sort of compromise the traditional Islamic view with a more complex and more nuanced understanding of what it's like to live in the United States with all these different cultural influences. So another question is, how does the article illuminate the difficulties of a cultural assimilation in America? Consider the ways the Imam encounters everyday U.S. traditions and habits, like shaking hands with a woman, listening to music, watching movies. Finally, before we close out the segment, describe how Mr. Shanta negotiates tradition with modernity. How does the Imam approach mental illness from an Islamic perspective, for example? How does he do this without pastoral training or psychiatric training in mental health? Since he is so much of his job is to be responsible for the well-being of his the mosque, the people who attend the mosque. So, in short, it's not an easy job for him, and I think it could be said that Another term that he is used in the book is what they call trust in God's plan, or what they call tawakkul, trusting in God's plan. The remedy typically suggested by imams is a spiritual one, sought through fasting, prayer, and reflection. Um, all right. I think in many ways you can relate to the difficulties that the imam faces when a person of faith, regardless of whether you're Islamic or a Christian. Sometimes when you're a person of faith, sometimes you are in conflict with people who don't share those same beliefs and values. So I think that closes out this segment, and stay tuned for the next segment that follows this one.